Good morning. My name is Alexis Castro. I'm a student here at Lone Star College-Kingwood. And I don't know if you've noticed, but there is this sort of trend in media where gay people are typically portrayed to be sad, whether that be in the shame of coming out or in the self-hatred of internalized homophobia. There seems to be some correlation there. And the typical answer to this is to conceal that, whether that be through the performance of asexuality or the performance of heterosexuality. And as an English major, I wanted to see how this worked within a book. So I chose one of the first openly gay novels out there, which is E.M. Forster's like Maurice, which led me to my research question of how does idealized purity and the neglect of lust lead the titular character to sadness in Maurice. To approach this project, I began by doing a queer reading of Maurice, which is just finding queer themes within the novel, which is pretty easy to do. Then I looked at Jesse Matz, who did a historical reading of this novel. Then I looked at Agnieszka Banerjee, who looked at philosophy within the novel. Then Krzysztof Verdonsky, who looked at Christianity. I consulted all of these works to construct my own reading of it, to read Maurice as a novel about sex and sadness, the title of the class I took this semester. So first I have to talk about the novel itself. This novel follows Maurice as he goes from a young gay teenager to a young adult. He is upper middle class, so he gets to go to boarding school, and where gay stuff happens. And in boarding school, he met Clive Durham. And Clive is really attractive to Maurice, and they start to have a romance. However, the interesting thing about Clive is that Clive doesn't want to have gay sex because he feels like that sort of taints the purity of gay love. And he cites the Symposium by Plato and other Grecian texts to do this. Our titular character is fine with this. He just wants romance at this point, and he can live without sex. However, whenever Clive starts to want to re-enter society, he does it by getting a wife and leading the gay life. This leaves like Maurice to be really depressed. He tries to go to conversion therapy to change himself. This doesn't work out though, and he's just left sad and seeking out physical intimacy with men through sports, which, yeah. And then this doesn't change until Maurice meets Alec, his second partner. And Alec is a working class man, doesn't really care about ideology whatsoever. So he has sex with like Maurice, and it's not until then that Maurice feels fully validated as a gay man that he can move on with his life. And they all run away together and live in the forest and live happily ever after as cottagecore gays. So, as I mentioned, I do a historical reading to begin with. Here we can see a dedication. The dedication typically goes to an important person in your life, like your mom, your sister, etc. However, Forster dedicated this book to a happier year. This is because this book is written in 1913, but it was not published until 1971. This could be attributed to a bunch of different attributes, mostly English society. This law passed in 1885 called the Criminal Law Act, which states that any male person who is found to commit acts of indecency with another male person will be prosecuted of a misdemeanor and sentenced to prison or hard labor. This is the same law that got one of the contemporaries to E.M. Forster, Oscar Wilde, to be imprisoned for sodomy. And his novel, The Picture of Dorian Gray, was used as evidence of his homosexuality, which they sentenced him to hard labor, etc. So knowing that this is his contemporary, E.M. Forster couldn't publish his own novel, knowing that this could be used to incriminate him in the future someday. So the characters within the novel themselves, they do not say that they are gay. Instead, they say that they are unspeakable of the Oscar Wilde sort, which leans into this sort of secrecy and homosexuality. This really paints a picture of the society that he was living in. And then moving on from that, another major aspect of the book was ideology. So there's a sort of big struggle between Christianity and Plato going on within this novel. Ideology affects all the characters in the novel, but it affects Maurice and Clive the most. So like Maurice isn't really a Christian, but he does subscribe to this sort of society that believes in Christianity. So he tries to participate in the aesthetics of Christianity by going to church at some point, etc. Clive, on the other hand, he does want to have a connection with God, but he can't do that because of some interpretations of the Bible, stating that you cannot be gay and a Christian. So to sort of combat this, he finds validation in different forms of literature, mostly by the Symposium by Plato. And in the Symposium by Plato, Plato makes a distinction between heavenly Aphrodite and common Aphrodite. Common Aphrodite being sort of love that's mostly lust that you feel towards another person. He claims that men feel this for women. And then he says that heavenly Aphrodite is a more pure type of love, felt between two adult men, which can be sexual, but it mostly centers on the growth of another person. The main issue with this, though, is that Clive, even though sex is allowed within the Symposium, he still has this Protestant upbringing that he brings onto the Symposium, this interpretation. So he still does not partake in sex out of fear of his upbringing, etc. And all of this culminates in Maurice also participating in this ideology whenever he gets with Clive. So which led me to my interpretation of this novel being a novel about escape. An escape of English society, an escape of ideology altogether. We first see Clive, who approaches his sexuality, but his version of escape from this sexuality is through repressing his sexuality by going to the Symposium by Plato and different ideologies of that sort. We also see Alec, who is a working class man. He doesn't follow an ideology because he doesn't really care about it. And we see that he confronts sexuality, and that is a form of acceptance where he actually partakes in sex. All of this leads with Maurice cycling in between these two people and these two versions of confronting one's sexuality. So Maurice does go from repression to acceptance, but to do so, he has to get rid of his ideologies altogether. Here we have a quote where he says that Christianity was a pawn that he lost to expose his heart, drawing an allusion to chess. When you expose a piece in chess, it can be offensive or on the defensive. So this led me to my interpretation that the only way that Maurice can move on as a upper class man is to following some form of ideology. So I concluded that his form of ideology that he goes with is hedonism. Begins by worshiping the man Jesus Christ. He goes on to worshiping the writings of Plato, but then it's not until he worships his own body and his own urges that he is truly liberated from all of these versions of oppression. So we have come a long way when it comes to representation in our society. And we have here pictured 3 different films. I have Brokeback Mountain, Call Me By Your Name, or Portrait of a Lady on Fire. All of these films are very explicit when it comes to your sexual themes. And through my research, I've come to the conclusion that this sexuality is important for for the liberation of queer people altogether. And the representation like this matters because somebody looking at a piece of media or literature could also be thinking that their happiness is dedicated to a happier year. Here, I'm very excited. Thank you very much for your time.